Welcome into the best in paranormal podcasting. This is Darkness Radio. I'm your host, Tim Dennis. Today, folks, I'm really excited about today's show. We're going to cover not one, but two topics today with not one, but two wonderful authors. And yeah, I may need not a one, but two, but a three count by the end of this, because I think I'll be all over the place and my brain will be spent, I think is the way this works. We've got some exciting topics, exciting authors to talk with today. We're going to jump right into it. We got so much paranormal, we're bursting at the seams. So we're going to talk not only about ghosts of Pennsylvania, but we're also going to talk about monsters of the Northeast. And with those two books, we have two wonderful ladies, two wonderful authors, Natalie Fowler and our own Jessica Freeburg. So there you go. It's going to be an exciting show. So let's jump into it. Let's talk first about Natalie Fowler. She's a practicing attorney, is an award-winning author and ghostwriter. Her published works include nonfiction books on poignant and sometimes dark historical events and haunting legends. She is a researcher and historian for Ghost Stories, Inc., and has led paranormal investigations at some of the most notorious haunted locations in the country. Inspired by the concept of spirit rescue, she co-founded a paranormal group called Paranormal Services Cooperative and has published accounts of her work as a medium in the field. You can learn more about her work and publications at nataliefowler.com. We'll put that link in the description of this program today. Our other guest, I think you should be familiar with her by now. If you're not, by gosh, you just aren't listening to this program enough. Jessica Freeburg is an internationally published author, history nerd, and researcher of the unexplained. She's written a variety of books ranging from graphic novels to paranormal fiction and nonfiction, focused on creepy legends and dark moments from history. As the founder of Ghost Stories, Inc., Jessica has performed paranormal investigations at reportedly haunted locations across the U.S. Evidently, they're not totally haunted. They're just reportedly. She has appeared in documentaries and shows on such networks as the Travel Channel and Amazon Prime, talking about ghosts and haunted places. And of course, you can hear her co-hosting right here on this show. You can learn more about her at jessicafreeburg.com, and we put her link up quite often, as we like to do, as we often do. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome into Darkness Radio, Jessica Freeburg, and of course, Natalie Fowler. Ladies, welcome in.
Thanks for having us.
We have a lot to talk about today. You know what? I'm going to shake it up. We'll do ghosts first, and then we'll do monsters to end the show. So we'll
right.
We'll start slowly, and then we'll
build
again. Yeah. First, I want to talk about the relationship here between the two of you. We'll start off that way. We'll go scariest, and then we'll go scarier. And no, I kid. So I want to start with Natalie, because we hear from Jessica all the time. Start with Natalie. So how does this professional relationship, friendship start off? How do the two of you get to know each other?
Oh my gosh, I have one of the best stories about this. So I was a member of SCBWI over in Belgium. I was living there as an expat and I had a great writers group when I was living there, and I was working on manuscripts and fiction works, and my family got transferred back to the United States, and I was trying to kind of recreate that same network, find a new writers group here. And I had just finished my second paranormal mystery manuscript, and I had signed with a literary agent, and she mentioned how important networking was, and I was just trying to just kind of recreate some of those contacts that I'd had overseas. And so I joined the SCBWI group here, and Jessica was one of the I think the assistant coordinator or something. And
regional advisors.
Yes, that's it. And so she had posted that she was doing a networking event at Barnes & Noble in Apple Valley. And so I went, and there were about 20 other aspiring authors there, all at different phases of their career. And that's one of the things that's so great about those groups, is you get to go network and talk to people and share where you're at in your journey. And we were going around the room, and I introduced myself, and I think I said something like, and I write paranormal mysteries, and all of a sudden Jessica's head just kind of snapped in my direction. And so we chatted after and quickly became fast friends after that. And then I think not too long after that, she invited me to go on one of the Ghost Stories Inc. Investigations. They were filming for a documentary, and she invited me to go along, and I was terrified. Not only because I'd been writing about ghosts for years at that point, but I didn't know if I really wanted to go shake one out of an attic. But more than anything, I was terrified of looking like an idiot doing something I'd never done before, because I'd maybe watched a handful of the ghost shows, but I hadn't actually participated in anything like that before. So I did what I do best, and I went and sat at the library all day, and I researched, and I found all these obituaries of some of the places we were investigating, all for the sake of not looking like an idiot on camera, and just so that I would have something to talk about. And I did. I found some really cool facts, something just to be able to contribute to the conversation as the night went on. And the next day they were presenting at Crypticon.
Okay.
Crypticon. And that morning she had sent me a note and asked me if I would join the group and be their researcher and historian. And so I said yes, of course. And then all of a sudden, I was like 10 minutes later, I was sitting on a stage at Crypticon talking about what it was like to be a ghost hunter. And I'd been doing it for about 12 hours at that point. So it was just really fun. And then we never looked back. I mean, at that point, then we were getting on airplanes and going to LA with backpacks full of ghost hunting equipment. And I remember thinking, God, my life has taken a really cool turn. Like, here's this soccer mom, like, having to explain what a K2 meter is to the security agent at the airport.
Yeah,
It was
doesn't
pretty
that suck?
awesome.
Yeah, especially when they're going through your stuff and then pulling it apart and then saying to you, exactly what does this do again?
Yeah.
That's horrible. Let's see what doing research gets you. I mean, it gets you nothing but trouble.
Yep. Trouble that I'm happy to be into.
Yeah, exactly. So now I'm going to ask you this, Jessica. In the times that I've interviewed author teams, I've always wondered, is there ever, and no one will ever tell me the truth on this, because everything's always hunky-dory and roses and wine and everything's wonderful when it comes to writing teams. Is there ever any friction between the two of you? I have to know this when you're writing.
Sure. I mean, like a little bit, like nothing major. I would say like we're both super calm people, so we don't really ever get mad, but I have an obsession with deadlines, and Natalie is more like, well, that's not working, so let's extend it for a week. And I'm like, no, we can't do that. And then I'm freaking out and she's calming me down. I mean, that's probably our only friction. And now I'm okay with being a week late for a deadline because it's life. And we're literally turning out 4 books every year, which is, a book every 3 months. So we have to look at it as a marathon, not a sprint.
Oh my God, I'm the
But we never get mad at each other. I mean, it's so easy because we both have similar personalities and similar writing styles, I would say. So really by the end of the manuscript being finished, I can't tell what I've written and what she's written. We each take a story and we research it and take responsibility for like getting the bulk of the information and writing the rough draft, and then we send it to each other, and then the next person has free will to do whatever they want to it, and just then they send it back to the person who originally wrote it and they get to review it one more time, and then we throw it in the manuscript and call it done. So if we look back at Monsters of the Midwest, I honestly don't remember even which stories I researched.
Wow. Okay. I was going to say, oh my God, I'm the Natalie in our relationship, Jess. I'm the one who's like, let's tape at 5. Okay. 5:15. I'm so relaxed.
I'm loosening up a little bit. I'm a very type A person, I think.
Now that I know that, I got to keep it tight. I know that.
No, don't.
Oh, I've become a single mom in the last few years, so I've had to just like kind of throw it up in the air. I used to be a lot more stringent about things. Now it's like, oh, I'm doing my very best, and that has to be good enough.
And that's
your very best is enough.
That's right. That's understandable. When stuff gets thrown at you 100 miles an hour, there's times where you got to put something down and just go, you know what, life takes precedent, and then you've got to come back and do, the other stuff. So,
and the only other thing I would add to what Jessica said was that we call each other soul sisters. Mm-hmm. And sisters, I mean, we have that true sister relationship where you're not always going to totally see eye to eye on every little thing, but because of that relationship and because our friendship is what it is, that it's not none of it is ever going to threaten that core of the bond that we have. So,
well, I think to work on projects like this and to do something that takes that much intensive work, you have to be close. I think you both have to be very close in order to do this type of work. And I've mentioned this with guests we've had recently. There was one book I read, Echo Road, where, and this was a work of fiction where they had to write as one voice, and they wrote it so flawlessly that it was one voice. And I noticed that too with reading both your books. It's one voice. And I can't tell who wrote what story. I mean, there's not a switch in voice, or there's not a switch in style or anything like that. There really is one voice behind the stories. So
thank you. And literally, we don't know either, Tim. We don't remember.
our writing styles are really compatible and very similar already. And then when you put it together and use the editing process the way Jessica described, like it ends up being flawless. And we've dabbled in fiction a little bit as well, just because that's really fun. And we have a great idea that we want to see come forward. But that's on the back burner right now, of course, with all these other books that we're turning out. But that was fun to play with that a little bit, to do some fiction work and kind of send it back and forth. And so I hope that goes somewhere someday too.
Well, and if you don't mind me talking out of school a little bit here, I mean, I do talk to Jess behind the scenes of the show. You guys are turning out books. I mean, this isn't a, we'll come out with a book or two a year and then we'll sit back and enjoy our lives. I mean, you guys are turning out books.
Yeah.
It's kind of crazy. And it's good that we love each other so much. I'm very picky about who I work with on any type of project. So Tim, that speaks highly of you, because I love, collaborating with you on Darkness Radio. But I'm very picky about who I will hook my wagon up to creatively, because you do spend so much time together. Both Natalie and I, it's like, okay, we get one book done and we're like, okay, we can take a week off, and then we'll be back to brainstorming and deciding which monsters we're going to research and who gets, to write about the vampires and who gets to write about the witches.
And she usually gets back to it before I do.
Well,
yeah, I'm very organized. I create charts and such.
Yeah, we're streamlining our process. It's going a lot faster now.
I was going to say, I don't think you need to be so hard on yourself there, Natalie. It's, as long as you get to it by the deadline time, I don't think
that's what I say.
Get to it, right?
It's true. And it's so funny because sometimes I'll be working and Natalie won't have uploaded anything for a little while. And I'll wonder in my head, like, are we going to make it? Are we going to make it? And then all of a sudden they just all start falling in. We use a Google Doc so we can see as each other adds things, which is kind of creepy and also fun at the same time. Because like last night we were working on just kind of like brushing off some notes for this interview, and I could see her typing and she could see me typing. It's just weird.
It was creepy.
Well, and I got to tell you, Jessica is the most prepared author I've ever seen for an interview, because when I sit down with most authors for an interview, they say, "Oh, what are we going to talk about?" It's a nice, easy conversation. That's what I tell them. We're just going to, just follow my lead. We'll talk about whatever, right? Jessica's like, "Okay, I got notes." And I'm like, and the only other person in the paranormal I've ever known that does this is Heather Taddy. Yeah, she's the only one who, and she's cornered me before too. And it's like, "All right, what are we talking about? I need to come up with notes." And I'm like, "No, it's not studying for a test here, kid. We're just, we're having a nice conversation. That's all this is."
I like to be casual, Tim, but I also I have a brain that is so packed full of stuff right now that I'm like, oh, what if he asked me about a monster I haven't thought about since, we wrote these books, back in October?
A year ago. Yeah, we turned it in last year. And so that's, in Jessica's defense, like we're 3 books on from this right now. So all these monsters are swimming in my head, and I can't tell you which one is, they're all my favorite, but to identify which one came from which book is really hard to do right now. So I'm grateful for the notes too.
We're going to walk into this slowly, and we'll talk in general terms. So we won't hurt anybody's brain today. So let's do this. Let's jump into. We'll start with the ghost side of things before we go to break today, and we'll tackle a favorite state of mine, Pennsylvania, and especially the Philadelphia area. I've done a lot of investigating in Pennsylvania. In my day, I sound like I'm old. I am. But Pennsylvania tends to be one of my more favorite states, and in that this state, I tell you, not between Revolutionary Wars and between just horrible hauntings. I mean, the jails there are something else. You've got just this rich history, going back, hundreds of years, and the hospitals, I don't know, they have a different history, and I can't tell you why. I don't want to insult Pennsylvania. I'm trying not to, but there's a different mindset there. There really is. And I guess I want to start with Natalie. What is it in your mind that is it about Pennsylvania that they've developed this rich haunted history?
Well, there's a lot going on there. I mean, one of the things that struck me when I was working on this book is just how deep the history goes. I mean, it was one of our very first colonies. It was one of the first areas of the United States to be settled. So that instantly gives you a lot of extra history. And then you also, when you think about the immigrants as they were moving in, you had all the religious groups coming in. So there were just a lot of different people living in very close quarters until the until the westward expansion. So you had a lot of people who were coming from very different backgrounds, all living in the same place. And then, just with the American history that we have, and the industrial revolution and different things happening, and the building and the railroad and all of those things. And it just makes for a lot of residual energy for sure.
Yeah.
And then I didn't realize, I mean, thinking back to my history class days, I didn't realize how much of the Civil War was fought there too, with all that. To find out that was going to be part of what we got to explore with this book was really exciting too.
I'll tell you, I'll give you a story that isn't even in your book that has to do with Civil War period, or not Civil War. I'm sorry, Revolutionary War.
Yeah, two wars. There were 2 wars there.
Right, 2 wars, which I had to think to myself, Revolutionary War, Pennsylvania, and then it dawned on me, and this was in the early days of Darkness Radio. A friend of mine, Chad Kalick, who was on Paranormal State, he hosted, or he had me host one of his trips up at a place called Dannybrook, which was owned by Glenn from The Real World. And I mean, you got to think back. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm talking, don't sprain your brain thinking back when Glenn was on The Real World, right? Somebody can tell me which season it was, but I couldn't tell you. And it was beautiful house. In fact, I think Glenn just sold Dannybrook, if I remember right, but a beautiful old colonial house. And what's interesting about it is the woods that's on the outskirts of the house are haunted. And we did these trips in the spring and in the fall so we could all, chilly enough, sleep out in the yard in tents and then have bonfires. And we could literally look out into the woods and see these ghosts, these Revolutionary War ghosts coming out of the forest.
Wow.
Yeah.
Was amazing.
So much residual energy in places like that. And
yeah. And I mean, they were magical weekends. They really were. And I mean, this was a location that we were in where George Washington brought his troops, and he brought them in retreat. I mean, it was just a temporary retreat stop where they had to stop, and basically some of the troops were injured. It was a medical stop. And I'm trying to remember if he wrote a letter that was found in the house. I'm trying to remember the backstory of it, but there's, and at one point, the British came through there. So you see British ghosts there. You see American ghosts there. It's just got this rich history, and a spot that I had no idea existed in Pennsylvania. And it's just, I think what is it? Is it 20 miles north and west of Philadelphia? Something to that effect. Again, my direction is off. I'm probably totally not correct on where the direction is, so don't quote me. But just this magical little place that totally not on anybody's radar, but I got to be there twice.
That's so cool.
Yeah. So one that's not in your book, but I figured I'd throw it at you anyways and let you know about it. But there are some places in your book I've been to. One of the ones I want to bring up today, Eastern State Penitentiary, which to me was absolutely wonderful. So I want to throw it at you, Jess. Eastern State Penitentiary. Give me a little highlight on Eastern State Penitentiary and a little bit of history.
I'll tell you, Tim, that one haunted me when I was researching it. Several of these did, honestly. And Eastern State Penitentiary was one of those locations that was really rooted in compassion and then turned into an absolute torturous nightmare for the people that went there. Pennsylvania was the first state to have a true penitentiary, and the idea behind it was kind of rooted in the Quaker faith, which is the faith that Pennsylvania was kind of founded on. And their idea was if we bring prisoners in and we isolate them, they can have true repentance because they can spend all this time thinking about what they've done and how they can do better in the future. So prisoners were led into this prison with eyeless bags over their head. So isolation started from the moment they walked in the door. And then they were put into these rooms that were basically soundproof, concrete walls on every side and above you and below you, and stayed in there for 23 hours a day with nothing but a Bible to read so that they could, improve their thinking and repent and better themselves. And then whatever tools they might have to do some work during the day. So they might be, donning socks or doing yarn working or sewing, that sort of thing. Which actually led to one of the more gruesome murders that occurred there with one of the security guards who was murdered right outside one of the inmates' rooms when inmate was completely convinced that the prison guards were poisoning him. And so he disassembled his sewing machine and used a piece of it to club the security guard to death right outside of his door in the little exercise yard that he had. And that's an area that's been a real paranormal hotspot. Did you ever get to be in that particular space?
I've been all over it. Yeah.
Ah,
We used to run Eastern State Penitentiary at least once a year, and we did it for a good 4 or 5 years. So we got to pretty intimate knowledge of the prison and a lot of time there. And I just remember the labyrinth feeling that, and reading your book,
yeah.
you guys captured it perfectly. Just that feeling of, you mentioned at one point in the book, being in the center of the prison and being able to look down any corridor. And there were two things in the book that I felt like you guys captured really well. It was that feeling of being in the center of the prison and not being able to, feeling like anywhere you looked, there was a corridor. You just felt like you were there. The isolationism was one of the things I felt like you captured really well. Just feeling isolated, right? That feeling of loneliness. You get that feeling of isolationism. And I'm not the most sensitive guy in the world, but you get that feeling like there's somebody there with you and they feel lonely.
Yeah.
Like they've been cut off from society when you walk around that prison. And it's whoever's been left behind. And I'm talking about a spirit being left behind. And then
Right.
the other thing is Capone's cell. Now, when you walk in, when they lead you in through the gates there, the tour staff, and they bring you in, when they bring you in, one of the first things you're hit with is Capone's cell. And it's exactly the way it was when he was there. They haven't touched a thing. And when you first see it, you're like, oh, wow, this is a really nice prison. But no, that's just the way Capone's cell was. And the way both you describe Capone's cell, it's exactly the way it was then. And it looks amazing. It for the time that he was there at Eastern State, it really did feel quite nice. It felt homey. The rug's there on the floor and you've got the radio in the corner and it's a stand-up radio, right? And it just kind of felt like it was like a nice little home away from home inside a cell for the short time that he was there, but they wanted to make him as comfortable as they could inside his jail cell, even though he was half mad at the time.
Yeah.
But you look at it and you're like, but then you're like, oh, well, every cell must be like this, right? But then you start to stroll down one of those corridors, and boy, is it cold and dingy and not a place you'd want to be caught dead. It's
Yeah.
just completely different, right?
Right. And think about like, they even had the cells down in the basement, which you probably saw for isolation. And it's like, dude, they're already isolated. Like, how can it get any worse? But that was complete light deprivation and there was no place to use the restroom. So they were just really like living in their own filth and complete darkness. That deprivation of your senses, I think, would just make someone absolutely crazy, no matter how sane you were. And I think they're probably already starting off with, troubled minds to begin with.
The thing that makes it feel really claustrophobic, and mind you, at the time when it was first built, there's no major metropolitan area. But in today's world, is the fact that it's there in Center City. When you imagine that you're in Philadelphia in a modern, in a modern city, and then you're in the I guess the northern part of Center City there, and there's a modern city operating around this prison. And mind you, there's nobody in there now. Obviously, it's abandoned. But this giant complex that takes up city blocks, and it's just sitting there. But it towers over everything, but it doesn't do anything. It doesn't function. It's, and you try to put your mind back, even back in the times of Capone, to think, well, what was here? What did the buildings look like? What, and try to imagine that a city functioned around this prison, and how claustrophobic it must have felt for the city to be thrown around this penitentiary. Must have, I mean, because you're right there. The city street is right there, and the prison wall is right there up against the street.
And wild that they built the city up like around it. Cause like you said, it was like on a farmland up on a hill. I think it was called Cherry Hill or something when they initially opened it. And the city, ballooned up
Yep.
right next to it and just kind of swallowed it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, eventually it became so claustrophobic that you're like, it had to be uncomfortable, so I don't know. I know it's, you couldn't obviously reopen that penitentiary and because it's not functional. It would be archaic. It would be almost torturous right now to try and form any type of penitentiary there now. And plus it wouldn't, I mean, it would be a hazard to anybody there now.
Yeah.
Especially if
I love that they preserved it enough that they can like do tours and kind of keep that history alive. I think that's like one of our favorite aspects of writing these books is like diving into the history and telling the stories from the past. And I think the ghost book in particular was really an opportunity to nerd out on history and
Yeah. Yeah. And I love that too. The fact that you can go and you can tour the penitentiary, you can put yourself back in time. And even from a paranormal aspect, you can investigate it, and you can still pick up residual energy or active energy from there and do with it what you will. Right. I mean, it's still a little bit of a, going to the zoo, poking the tiger in the cage type of deal, but
yeah.
but at the same time, it is what it is.
And
Right?
I think it's just so important to preserve some of this history, the way these ghost stories do. There's a reason that these souls are ghosts or stuck.
Sure.
And part of it is because of the, atrocious treatment that they got in their life. And I think so often that's the kind of history we want to kind of shove under the rug. And that's also the history that we need to be really careful not to repeat. So preserving this, and also it shows us how far we've come, because I mean, that's one of the things that struck me when we were exploring some of the insane asylum stories in this and the institutions, because we talk so much now in our present time about how desperate the mental health system is and how we need more resources there. But it really wasn't that long ago where we were chaining people up for being crazy.
Well, speaking of that, Natalie, I was gonna move on to Pennhurst. Do you want to tackle Pennhurst?
I think Jess did the research on this one, so she wants to jump in on that.
I went after all of the prisons and most of the mental.
Okay.
You know what that says about me, you guys.
Let's tackle Pennhurst as long as we're talking about mental health, because Pennhurst is an interesting topic as well.
Oh, Pennhurst was also heartbreaking. Again, they're trying to come up with a solution for what they see as a real problem. When you look at the research and look at how they spoke about people with mental health issues, the words they used to describe them, I'm not even going to repeat. But they truly have quotes in the documentation of these conversations with professionals designated to protect them and do something with them, that they're a hazard to society, and really the only way to deal with them is to eliminate them, isolate them, one, and don't let them reproduce, so we don't continue to have this gene pool in our society, because they're a hazard to our society, I believe are the exact words that they used. The startling thing is, like, what could get you put into one of these places? Like, I was reading the list and I was like, dude, I'd have been there like 20 times.
We both would have been there.
I also would have been burned at the stake for being a witch, but that's a whole nother conversation.
You and me both. I have some ancestors that were,
I have a daughter who had seizures when she was younger, and I remember thinking this when we were at a place where had the history of keeping people in the county poor farm, and some of the people that would be sent there were people who were epileptic, and I thought, well, how is that a bad thing? Like, you're punished because you have seizures, like your synapses aren't connecting properly in your brain, and that doesn't make you crazy. I mean, all the rest of the time she was perfectly functional, just every now and then something, would misfire. And so I find that fascinating to think you have people with true debilitating mental illnesses, and then you have people who are like you and I, and just occasionally have an issue that causes them to have a seizure. Or you have people who are deemed undesirables. They were orphans or immigrants that, were looked down upon at the time. Criminals, like, all these people were housed together in the same facility. I think with Pennhurst, the most startling thing was when the journalist came in. I think it was in the 1968, right before the 70s hit, and he brought in a film crew, and he said he was having such a hard time keeping people in the crew because they were so disturbed by what they were seeing, and that his crew was literally getting physically ill because it was so disturbing. You had grown men who were, in cribs, basically. You had other grown men that were skeletal forms of what a man should be, like they're just skeletons swaying to music in their head in the corner, and they're naked. Some of them are balled up on the floor. You've got little children who are stuck in cribs who don't know how to walk, and their muscles are atrophied and they can't walk because they've never had the chance to. And you've got older kids chained to beds. So just the depravity of the way they were treated by the people who were supposed to care for them is really so heartbreaking. And of course, that building is going to become a container for residual energy, and it's going to be haunted.
And it's made Pennhurst one of the hotspots that paranormal investigators want to go to. They, I've heard nothing but, I mean, just reports from other investigators online that say, you got to go to Pennhurst. You got to check out Pennhurst. It's, and people that have organized trips there have talked about I hate to put it this way when you talk about depravity, but talk about what a hotspot it is and what a gold mine it is for evidence. But, it's, one man's trash is another man's treasure. I hate to put it that way, but it has pulled up some amazing results for people when they've gone there for investigations.
Yeah, and it was haunted even before it was empty. I mean, the people who lived there reported hauntings of the time that they were there. So,
and I don't think that it's a bad thing to go and have that interaction. it's a hotbed for a reason, and it goes back to the history. And if we're learning about the history in whatever way we're learning about it, then it helps us to do better and be better for each other going forward, and not just shove it under the rug.
True. Very true. Very true. Another place that I've been and I've investigated that I don't want to say enjoy, because you can't enjoy a place like this, but I mean, you can, but you can't. And again, I struggle with this, and I know, Natalie, what you're saying, and I get what you're saying. I struggle with it personally, just because of the fact that there's suffering that goes on there. And that's the battlefield at Gettysburg, or Devil's Den in particular. Just knowing the atrocity that happened there. But yeah.
Yeah, that's a huge draw. That's a huge part of my work in the paranormal, is to go into it with almost a duty of sorts. And that's a colleague of mine started using the word spirit rescue, and that really resonates with me. As paranormal investigators, we go out there, and there's so many people going and looking to prove that there's something there. Well, if you took all of the evidence that we've gathered over the years, you'd be able to prove beyond a reasonable doubt in front of a judge and jury that we are interacting with something intelligent. So then the next question becomes, what do we do about that? What is our responsibility? And so, that concept of spirit rescue, I don't think anything should have to be trapped in a space that for all eternity. So that really has driven a lot of my medium work in this field. So
let me ask you this, Natalie, because I'm curious as to what your findings are on this, because I've heard so many different hypothesis, thesis, whatever you want to call it, goes when it comes to earthbound spirits. I've heard some people say, well, an earthbound spirit may be just the residual energy that we leave behind here, that icky part of us that, part of us ascends, the other part of us, we leave that part behind. I've heard some people say, well, no, it is our spirit that we've, that we're afraid to face the light, so we stay here. I've heard so many different, I guess, theories as to what that earthbound spirit is. But what is it that you believe?
I think there's a couple different things going on. We've done so much work at the Palmer House, and that's such a great place to educate yourself on what this stuff is. And I think that there can be a lot of different layers happening. I believe very much that our loved ones on the other side, their heaven gets to be wherever they want it to be. So there's a high vibrational spirit that can come back and interact with us when we're on an investigation. So, and that certainly happens a lot at the Palmer House, where you've got loved ones showing up because there's an opportunity to come say hi. And so they're going to take that when they have it. And so it might not even be something that's happening in the space. Our loved ones can show up anytime and give us signs. And we all, we talk about those signs a lot, the pennies from heaven, or the bird, the cardinals. So I think our loved ones on the other side are showing up a lot. So that's one layer of what can happen on a paranormal investigation. But I think there's also a lot of these places that we researched have that heavy residual energy. When you've got someone who's emitting fear of their circumstances or that isolation, I think that energy can hang in the air and get trapped in a space. So that creepy feeling, we all know what it feels like when you walk into a room after somebody's been arguing, and you can feel that energy hanging in the room. So that's a lot of these places are just filled with so much residual energy. But then I also think that there is I think a way that a spirit can get trapped. For me, when I feel that, it's more of a low vibration. And usually it comes with those emotions of feeling confused or scared, or some of those heavier feelings that we have. And I think what that is I like to describe it as like a sliver of energy that gets left behind. Okay. And in my work, what I've kind of landed on is my theory for why that happens. I think it goes to our chakras. Like, we have these energy centers, and our conscious body develops alongside of our physical body when we're in the womb. And And so you've got the crown chakra is the first chakra center to develop on down to the root chakra. We all know those little kids who have their head in the clouds. And part of that is because their root chakra hasn't fully attached to the earth center yet. And so when our bodies, when we die, when we go through that dying process, if you've ever sat with somebody in hospice, I think there's a lot you can watch as those energy centers kind of disconnect in reverse order. So your root chakra on up, you know, if you sat with somebody in hospice, a lot of times they're talking about the loved ones that they're seeing, or they're talking about the angels that are coming to visit. And so they're already working on that transition process where their soul's going to leave their body. But we also carry our fears and our belief systems in those lower level chakras. So let's say somebody is really afraid of dying because they weren't a great person and they've been taught their whole life that their religion says that if they haven't gone to church every Sunday and done all these things, then they're going to be stuck in purgatory, or they're going to have to go to hell, or worse. And so if they're afraid of dying because they didn't do what they believed they should have been doing in their life, there can be that fear that causes that, I think, just a sliver of your energy, that it causes that chakra center not to shut down properly.
Okay.
And that can leave a little sliver of your energy field here. And as human beings, we have free will choice, and we have free will choice in death as we do in life. So, you know, if you're afraid of going to the other side, or if you're afraid of what's going to happen or being judged, or if you believe that you don't deserve to go because you're supposed to go to purgatory, then you can almost put yourself in purgatory of sorts. And that little sliver of energy gets left behind. So I think, I mean, that's a lot of my medium work, is just like, you know, explaining to a soul, you don't have to be here. You get to go. You deserve, your heaven gets to be wherever you want it to be. And it's just kind of resetting that expectation of what heaven is. And that can free up energy to go where it's supposed to. So.
Excellent. Yeah, no, it makes complete sense. Makes complete sense. So let me ask you this: in a setting like Devil's Den at Gettysburg, where so many soldiers had been ambushed, died, unexpectedly, and you've got so many souls that are trapped, maybe, you know, life forces that are cut off unexpectedly, may feel like they've got more to do, or they've got a message to pass on, or whatnot. How do you,
or might not even know that they're dead.
don't even know that they're dead. How do you resolve that so that they can eventually move on? Or is that a scar in the earth that's so deep that maybe it takes time? How does that resolve?
I think it goes to what your responsibility is in that. And I think, like, you know, as a paranormal investigator, I don't necessarily go into places like this planning to just clear it all, you know, because I don't have consent to do that. And so there's some, I guess, ethics involved in some of this. And I always say that if something's going to follow me home, then it's fair game. But it's not my job to go in and you know, that's, you have to be careful with your ego, I think, in this work. And that's where your ego kind of takes over. And I think there's some of it, you know, I think a lot of it is shifting all the time, to these energies. And I think some of it gets cleared naturally. I've seen houses where it was really dark energy, but then the family that moves in is so light and happy that energy alone can balance it out and help. So I think we, as the ones with the human bodies, have a lot more power over this stuff than I think we know.
Yeah.
And
I was going to add one thing I found really fascinating. Several years ago, we were working on a documentary, and we interviewed actually Natalie's neighbor, who does past life regression work.
Eric Christopher.
Yeah, Eric Christopher. And it was such a profound and interesting interview, because he talked about one of his patients who he hypnotized, he put under, and he walked him back into his past life. And in that past life, I mean, I think he was like back into the like 1500s, right? Like medieval times.
Mhm.
He died really suddenly and he died really angry. Like the moment he died, I think the story was he found out his wife was having an affair with
Yeah,
another, yeah.
I'm
And
getting
so
chills.
Wow.
he fell off the stairs and died suddenly. And in his death, he was so embroiled in that feeling of anger that he didn't want to let go. He was just enraged. And so when the proverbial light came, he didn't go to it. He wanted to stay back and be in this anger. And he recalled going through centuries, decades,
Mhm.
centuries of time. The furniture was changing, the clothing was changing, and he was seeing all of this in spirit form. He realized when he would do things that frightened people, it actually kind of gave him a boost of energy, which kind of aligns with what we kind of think. Like when we're
Yeah.
scared, they seem to be more active. It seems to feed them, so don't be scared, right?
Right.
So that was interesting. But then he said at one point he got tired of it, and he realized he was tired and he wanted to be done and he wanted to go home. And so he crossed himself over. So he didn't need to be crossed over. And so I do think there are probably spirits who at some point just are like, this is getting old. I'm tired of haunting people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Gonna go take a nap.
that was the most fascinating story. It taught me so much about the afterlife. And he talked about how he would go sit on a hill and there was constantly, every now and then there would be a pull of light and he would say, no, I'm not going. And finally, like Jessica said, he got tired and let himself go and he went to the light. Like it was always coming for him. So
Wow.
yeah.
It's really interesting. I mean, an incredibly educational, but it very interesting in that. I mean, I've heard of that too. I mean, but it was years ago, and it was the woman who the Ghost Whisperer TV show is based off of, and for some reason her name is escaping me right now. But she's done multiple appearances on the show, and she was the one who had mentioned that there's this universal light, and it appears everywhere. I mean, you can catch it at a funeral home; it appears in different places.
Yeah.
But at any time, a spirit can cross themselves over if they choose to. They just need to look for this light, and they can step into it. They don't need us to do it. They don't need anybody to do
Mhm.
it. Uh,
Yeah, and I think sometimes we can assist them, like Natalie said, sometimes just that encouragement. I think one of my favorite stories from when we were investigating was when I accidentally crossed a spirit
Yes.
over at the Morse Jamel mansion. And I didn't even know I could do that, first of all. So I wasn't trying to, but it was really all of us were sitting in the basement, and there was a history of a servant or a slave who
Slave.
had, I think it was a servant, Haitian servant maybe, who had committed suicide
Mhm.
and haunted the premises. And we were sitting downstairs in the kind of big kitchen area with the kind of dirt floor, and we had our lights out and all of our equipment up, and everything was going gangbusters while we were talking to this spirit. And I just started to feel all of her sadness. And like, so then I was talking her through what I was feeling. And I was like, you feel guilty, feel like you don't get to go to heaven because you took your life, but that's not true. Like you can go. Your family's waiting for you. I don't even remember everything I was saying, but as I was talking to this spirit and just giving it compassion and empathy and encouraging it to release that feeling of guilt and fear, it was like this swirl of energy that we all felt. It was crazy. And then all the lights and all the equipment just went crazy for one more split second, and then everything just stopped.
Oh wow!
And
And we were
Jess
like,
just
oh.
comes up and she goes, I think I just crossed one over.
You ruined the tourism over there, Jess. What are you doing?
There were plenty. It was in Harlem, so there
Okay.
were plenty of.
All right. Well, in that case, okay, you didn't ruin the tourism. Well, all right. Um, just one note before we take a break, and then we head out and talk about the monsters of the Northeast. The Jenny Wade house. I have a funny story about it. So, there's a phenomenology was an event that was out in run by a good friend of mine. that we used to be invited out to every year. Unfortunately, they're not running the event out there anymore. And it was hosted out there different venues. It was the what's the name of the hotel? The one on the edge of town there. I keep wanting to say the Roosevelt, and it's not the Roosevelt. It's the I can't remember. Again, old age, it happens. But the they managed to put together an investigation at the Jenny Wade house. And we were playing around. Bill Chappell had a new version of the Ovilus and he had different pieces of the Ovilus that he had given to different people to use. He's like, I want you to field test it for me. So he gave different teams this version of the Ovilus to use. And it had kind of a newer voice and everything. And it was very sharp, right? This is back before you could put it in your phones or anything like that. Back in the old days, right? So we're in the Jenny Wade house. Now, again, here's a disclaimer. It's a little PG. But one of the investigators had let one rip. Right? And there's certain things in this Ovilus. Now, mind you, the Ovilus at this time only had like 500 or 800 words in it or something like that. The Ovilus goes, fart, like really loud. As obviously one of the investigators had ripped ass. And Bill Chappell starts laughing hysterically. And he goes, I didn't program it to say that.
Yeah.
So the Ovilus is my favorite as a writer. Like, that's my most favorite paranormal investigative piece of equipment ever.
So we got the Ovilus to say fart in the Jenny Wade.
That's great.
Yeah. So just a little side note. So when I saw the Jenny Wade house in the book, I thought that's the first thing I thought of.
Sparked a good memory about farts.
It did.
God, I wish we would have known that before we went to print. We would have put that in there.
It's such a minuscule tale about farts in the Jenny Wade house that I'm sure they would have been embarrassed to even know it was in there. But yeah, so again, folks, the book, one of two that's out there right now. Now I have to ask you this question before we go to break. So why release both at the same time? Is that a publishing thing, or just you decided both needed to come out at the same time?
Our publisher gets to decide that, and next year at this time we'll have 4 books that come out at the same time. So they're just so excited about these books. It's adorable and I love it. They're kind of a publisher that specializes in books that have regional appeal, right? But a lot of their books are flowers of the Northeast or fossils of, the South or whatever it is. And then we're like, let's do monsters. And they're like, okay. And then our first monster book was like one of their top sellers, and they ended up, re-releasing it again, which means it was doing really well. And they're like, yeah, you guys are onto something here. So now they're just like, how many can you write in a year? Like, realistically, how many could you actually put out in a year?
Wow. Well, let's hope you both don't end up with carpal tunnel because of all this. I mean,
too late, Tim.
Well, all right. Let's hope they cover that carpal tunnel at the end of this. Ghostly Tales of Pennsylvania is the name of the book. Jessica Freeburg and Natalie Fowler have put out just one of 2. We'll talk about the second one after the break, which is Monsters of the Northeast. We'll get into some of the monsters that are out there in the Northeast when we come back. Plus, I have a monster right here in Minnesota we'll talk about. That we'll bring up, and we'll do it right after the break. Although it's not as impressive as the monsters that are in the Northeast. I will let both ladies know about it when we come back. Jessica Freeburg and Natalie Fowler are my guests today. Talk about monsters of the Northeast and a not so impressive monster here in Minnesota when we get back right here on the best in paranormal podcasting. This is Darkness Radio. Welcome back to the best in paranormal podcasting. This is Darkness Radio. I'm your host, Tim Dennis. Jessica Freeburg, Natalie Fowler are my guests. Last segment, we talked about the ghostly tales of Pennsylvania. Now we're going to get into monsters of the Northeast. But before we go to the Northeast, we're going to keep it right here in Minnesota. Now, yesterday on the program, it was Mally Fox and I almost forgot Mally's name. By God, I am getting old.
Our old man.
I am old. I'm ancient. Mally Fox and I were talking about a Minnesota mystery beast that has baffled experts. Now, if you listened to the show yesterday, you know, it wasn't that big of a mystery. As a matter of fact, I'll show to the camera. I have my iPad here. What this, it's not even a that much of a mystery. I'm going to show you exactly what this thing is. Does that look like much of a mystery to you guys?
That looks like a dog.
It's not quite a dog, and it's not
A
quite
coyote.
It's a hybrid between a wolf and a dog.
Yeah. Oh.
And when you get I'll get a better up close picture of it. It's the cutest little thing ever. Take a look at that.
Oh, it looks like it wants to eat my face off.
It does, doesn't it? It looks like if you let it close enough, it probably just lick your face up.
It's so cute. And people thought that was an actual monster, like a cryptid?
Well, it is. It technically is a cryptid, Jess.
Because it hasn't been identified as a particular species.
University of Minnesota right now is identified this particular canid as a species that is unknown right now. It's a wolf-dog hybrid that's been discovered wandering the woods of northern Minnesota. And the experts at the University of Minnesota can't make heads or tails of it. It's part of the Voyagers Wolf Project. The U of M research group captured footage of the animal, which looks super cool. And by the way, we haven't been able to give you proper perspective. I'm going to try and give you perspective off of this picture here. Does that give you an idea of how tall this thing is?
It's big.
That's a huge, huge wolf dog. That thing is probably standing about 3 feet, maybe taller. It might even be 3.5 feet. I mean, it's huge. It's big. It's a big dog. And its hackles raise even higher. But it was roaming around on this trail. The debate ensues as to what exactly this apparent wolf pooch may be and how the heck it happened. Now, when Mally and I were talking about it, I thought that maybe it was a wolf that had mated with a domestic husky, like it had gotten into someone's yard and then mated from there. They say it's not a hoax. The mystery beast, again, looks super cool, and it's been spotted nearly a dozen times in the area since late March, per the group, which posted vids onto social media. Here's another picture of it to give you some perspective to how big this thing is.
Yeah, it's very big. And it looked like there were several of them in that one video.
Yeah.
So there's a whole pack.
Yeah. So this thing probably it probably stands at least half as high, if not higher, to a deer. And you know that's probably what they're hunting.
Right.
So, I mean, this thing is huge.
Well, this is the kind of stuff that I love, because I do think a lot of times with these cryptids that we write about, people are seeing things that just haven't been classified yet.
Yeah.
You know, there's a lot of different theories, and sometimes we'll research something and I'll think, oh, that's a straight up alien. You know?
Yeah.
And then sometimes I'll be like, oh, that's interdimensional, obviously. And then, but a lot of times it's like, especially with the sea creatures, I'm like, oh, that's just some sort of critter that we just don't know what it is yet, you know?
Absolutely. Yeah. You know, when I first saw the story, I went, ooh, mystery beast in Minnesota. And I looked at it and I went, well, it's a wolf. But then you read into the story, and I mean, the University of Minnesota is pretty reliable when it comes to when they track different animals. And they said, well, it's a wolf canid hybrid. And I went, okay, well, what was that wolf getting into, first of all? And then second, it's like, but that looks like a husky. It's got the face of a husky. I mean, It's got those deep blue eyes. So, you know, it's not fully a wolf. and it's, you know, but it's got, when you look at the hackles, they come way high off the neck and the back. So it's a different looking creature. It's totally not a wolf. It's definitely got dog in it, but I don't know if it's mixed with a coyote or what it's mixed with, but it's just different. It's just different. So I don't know. But it's definitely technically a cryptid.
Yeah, the definition.
At least for now, until they get one and are able to get some sort of DNA off of it and are able to classify it. It's now a cryptid.
And give it a cool name. That's what every cryptid needs.
That's right. They'll probably name it Anthony Edwards after the Timble. I don't know. I mean, it's a bad joke, but there you go. So Monsters of the Northeast. Both you ladies have come out with a second book. As if one wasn't good enough, you came out with a second one, which is also excellent. And it's got a cool cover too. I gotta give you that. But by the way, who does the cover art for your books?
Again, our publisher decides that. They do send us the images and we do get to weigh in. I was a little dubious about the Ghost of Pennsylvania one. I'm like, why is there a turkey on the cover?
A turkey.
And so they did another iteration of it. They did a couple different iterations of it because I was like, what is happening? And then we went back to the original one, I think. So I'm like, yeah, it's fine.
Okay. A turkey.
But yeah, the monster ones are really cool. When they re-released the Monsters of the Midwest and they came out with a new cover, I was like, it's like so retro cool. Like I just love it. So I was excited to see the new cover for the Northeast is similarly awesome.
Yeah, it's got that bear-like tapestry look to it. It's really cool. I like it. I like that. Yeah, I like that cover. All right. So let's get into it, because you've got some interesting stories that I've heard before. By the way, Lorencoleman's contribution. Talk about that for a moment. How do you get Lorencoleman contributing to the book?
He was just so kind. I just reached out to him on Facebook, and in her research, we found so much Lorencoleman in the newspapers. Like because that's where we really
this is his stomping grounds. This is where he really established himself as a cryptid researcher, and having met him a few times at Paracons and such, I mean, he's amazing.
Yeah, he's such a smart guy. And so he was in the newspapers a lot. And that's really where Natalie and I try to begin our research for every book, is like, what can we find in primary source documentation? And so Lauren was in countless newspaper articles. And so I just reached out to him and I just asked him, do you mind terribly if we use some of your stories and explained the way that we write them, because we write them a little differently than, just a straight up regurgitation of here's what happened. We use what's called a narrative nonfiction format, which kind of allows us to create narration that logically could have existed. I liken it to like if you watch a recreation of something on the Travel Channel of a ghost encounter or something, and the actors are talking to each other. Well, we don't know that's exactly what they said, but it makes sense for the situation, right?
Right.
So I kind of explained that to him, and he was very gracious and said, "Of course." And I said, "Do you mind if we use your name?" And he said, "That's fine." So I owe him a copy of the book.
Oh, yeah.
Well, and also there was one story in particular where he did so much investigate, like he actually became part of the story. And so we didn't want to use him in the story without getting his consent and piece for that.
Yeah. I do try to do that if we have a story that's pretty modern and the people are still, around, and I do try to reach out to them and just say, do you mind if we use your story? If I can't get in touch with them, often we'll just change the names. But if I'm going to use their names, I want to talk to them about that and make sure they're cool with it first.
Especially someone like Lorencoleman.
Yeah, you don't want to step on Lauren's toes.
Yeah, he's so instrumental in this field that out of respect, we just had to make sure.
Right. One of the stories, and I'm trying to, again, my old memory. One of the stories that has one of those people is a good friend of the show is Lon Strickler. And that is again, I'm trying to remember. It is
It's one of the Bigfoot ones, and
it's Sykesville, Maryland, Sykesville Monster. Yes,
yes,
Bigfoot encounter.
we also owe him a book because he was kind enough to let us use his name.
Yeah, yeah, and that particular story is, I know it pretty much. I don't want to say it shook Lon to his core, but I mean it's a pretty harrowing tale. Not only because of what Lon went through, but because the authorities gave him the runaround. I mean, it's one of those things where he's trying to tell the authorities, no, I saw this creature, and they're like, oh no, go ahead and go home. And he's like, go ahead and go home.
Yeah.
You know, huh? And they blow him off. So
Yeah.
he's getting, a bit of a jumble there too. And Lon, if you know Lon, he's very much a straight shooter and very truthful and very, forthright. And it's just one of those tales where, again, we'll have you read the book so you can read more about the Sykesville monster. And I know he's told the tale here on the show too. But it's one of those tales where not only did he go through a very stressful time, but he was also denied by authorities at the same time.
I'm starting to notice that that's a regional difference too, because we're working on the Monsters of the South right now, and the authorities are seem in the stories that we're coming across in that book, the authorities seem to be much more open and understanding and compassionate about the things that people are witnessing, and hopefully, I mean, that's some of what our work is doing here too, is making it a little bit more comfortable for people to come forward with these stories. I think that was our dedication in one, if not all of our books. Like, thank you to the witnesses that are brave enough to come forward with these stories, because for every one that does, there's probably 5 that don't.
Right. And so many of them aren't believed, and they first of all, they feel crazy because they just saw something that they can't wrap their brain around.
Yeah.
I think that's why Natalie and I get really passionate about sharing these stories. One, because we love preserving the legends and the myths of the different areas, but also because so many people have encounters that they can't explain, and often they're not believed, and that's not cool. So we're like, we believe you, and we want to share your story, because then more people can share their stories,
Is it just the attitude of the East Coast that it's naturally skeptic, or what is it that people aren't quick to want to believe you when you see something?
That was the case in the Midwest too, though. Remember, we did the
Yeah.
Beast of Rare Road, and that guy got harassed after
so
sharing his story.
ostracized, and he tried to recant his story, and once it's out there, so you can't really do that. But yeah, I think, I mean, or there's just so much happening in the South. I think that's more than anything. Like, we cannot wrap our heads around how many stories are there. So
we could write a whole book about West Virginia. It's so easy. I'm like, every monster's in West Virginia.
Well, that brings up another point with the volume of stories that's out there, with the amount of people that have come out and said, I've had an experience with a cryptid, I've had an experience with a ghost, I've had an experience with whatever you may want to bring up. Why is it that we continue to doubt? What is it about the human condition where you want to doubt first and believe later?
I think it's arrogance. Honestly, it's ego. If we don't understand it, we don't want to accept it. And I mean, a lot of people know. I don't have that problem. You guys don't have that problem. I'm very much like, oh, I don't understand it. Cool. I want to know more about it,
well,
but
yeah, and it's also that logic piece. Like, I have a lawyer brain, so I'm looking to prove it. Like, you want to prove it. And a lot of the stories, it's one thing to go as a paranormal investigator and sit in a dark space and get interaction and call it in, and you get your equipment buzzing and all that. But when you're out there looking for Bigfoot, that's a little bit harder to prove. That's harder to go after and get that concrete, tangible proof that it's there.
I might have asked you this question before on a previous show, Jess. I'll ask you again, and then I'll ask Natalie. What's the most believable phenomena to you? Is it ghosts, aliens, or Bigfoot?
I mean, I honestly believe them all equally because I just think if people are sharing an experience they had, they experienced something. And I think there are too many instances and encounters with all of these things to say that any of them are not real. I have more experience with ghosts because I have been seeing them most of my life. So to me, that was a no-brainer to believe in ghosts. It maybe took me a little bit more researching to be like, oh, well, I guess monsters are straight up real too. So,
Yeah.
but the more you research, the more you find. And it's like, I have to believe them all.
Natalie, how about you? Ghosts, aliens, or Bigfoot? Does one stick
Well,
out more than the other?
I think it's the story itself. Like I think some of these stories you hear and they're clearly more campfire legends, or a story that's evolved through a game of years of telephone, right? Where it gets added on and there's like details. There was a cryptid in one of our last books that had, I mean, the description was so comical. It had polka dots and stripes and fur and scales. Like, I mean, it just got like, you could tell that everybody just added their little piece to it. So you've got that, but then you've also got, there was a story from Monsters of the Midwest, and the actual monster is escaping me right now. I think it might have been, it was the three-legged thing. And you've got, and I think Lorencoleman was the one who came in and investigated it, but you had a little boy out in the front yard playing and his tennis shoes got tattered and torn. And he came running in the house and his parents couldn't explain why. Well, 3 doors down, these kids were home alone, and something about 10 minutes later was trying to get in their house, and there were scratches on the wall and things like that. And then their parents came home and the dad saw it in the driveway. And so you've got these different eyewitness accounts that have no idea that the other person is experiencing something. And then when you can go back and put all these things together, that to me is a very tangible, real story. So I think it truly depends on the facts and circumstances of each case.
Okay.
Because that story is probably more believable to me than maybe a ghost story that doesn't have that supporting evidence. But there are certainly ghost stories where you've got the Kinect camera images and you've got the Ovilus and all these pieces of equipment working together to tell you this piece of evidence. So
I have one legend I want to talk about, or one phenomenon I want to talk about that I find a little less believable than others that you write about in the book. And I'll throw it your way here, Natalie. That's vampires. I don't know. You know, it's great movie lore. It's great to watch on a screen, but when people start talking about them in real life, I have a hard time drawing that line. But tell me a little bit about what you've written about vampires in the book and drawing that line to real life and them actually existing.
oh my gosh. Well, this is probably one of our favorite parts of this book. As Jessica said earlier, we usually start with some initial groundwork research when we're putting together how many stories we're going to include or what stories we're going to focus on. And when you search monsters in the Northeast, the vampire legends kept popping up. And so I think the first story, or the first story I read, the first account that I read was about 2 little boys who were playing in a rock pile, and they were sliding down the rock pile. And it's so fun when we're writing these stories to get to recreate that moment, because the first thing I do is look at the time period it takes place and do a little research on what was happening. And this was right around the time Goonies came out. And so these boys were playing in this rock pile, and one of them finds a human skull. And he is beyond excited, and he pedals his bike home and he shows his mom, and his mom's like, what? So they end up calling the police. He can't keep it, unlike what he wanted. He wanted to keep the skull. And so they end up calling the police, and it starts this whole investigation and archaeological dig of this area. Well, so they start digging and they find what I think is an unmarked family cemetery of all these different graves, a small community of people, and coffins. And they find a coffin, and on the top of the coffin in brass tacks, it's spelled out JB55. So that's kind of mysterious already.
Yeah.
Well, they open the coffin and they find that the body has actually been dismembered, and it was positioned in a way where it was the skull, and then they took the 2 femur bones and crossed them like the Jolly Roger flag. So then all these researchers are like, what is this? What the heck is happening? And so they start to uncover and do the research, and I think they sent it off to DNA testing, and I don't even think we had the technology yet at the time to be able to determine who this was or what happened. And it just so happened they were bringing in students through this research space, and one of them made a comment, well, have you ever heard of the Jewett vampire scare? And they're like, what? And so then that starts a whole string of this kind of forgotten research. And it turns out that in this area, going back, and it wasn't even that long ago, it was 1850s, the mid 1800s. And people were dying. Whole families were dying of consumption. And at the time, they didn't realize that that was actually tuberculosis, and it's incredibly contagious, and it would just wipe out families over the wasting disease, they called it, and it would just wipe out entire families. These stories were of, families with 11 children, and 1 survived out of the entire lot, mom and dad included. And so you've got this desperate situation where this plague of sorts is coming through the area. And also these people are really isolated. Not a lot of transportation back and forth. They don't have a lot of news resources to get information. But there were fire and brimstone preachers going from town to town. And at some point, one of these preachers talks about the vampires and how, and so he starts kind of this rumor that happened. And one of the first vampire stories was a family, Lieutenant Spaulding and his family. So Margaret Spaulding had the 11 children. And over the course of about 15 years, she buried almost all of them, including her husband.
Wow.
And so just desperate for answers, desperate for information, and also a lot of fear. So of course you've got your neighbors talking, what's happening? Where's the curse? Who cursed this family? Because they're all dying. And so someone starts this rumor. Well, so the theory of the vampires, you were supposed to be able to tell if a person was a vampire based on the roots. If you could dig up the coffin, and if there was a black root that went through the coffin, that was supposed to be a sign of a vampire. And then also, as you got further down the road with this story, if you dug up a coffin and the body still had blood in its organs, that was supposed to be a sign of a vampire. So these families were just so desperate for answers that they dug up. So she actually ordered that her whole family be dug up, and it turned out that the last son that had died, Josiah, I think, he had a root that had gone through his coffin. And so she's like, it's a vampire. So they burned the root, they burned the body and all of his organs, and miraculously her daughter survived. So it was like that one little coincidence that then gave fuel to this legend that this is what was happening. And so people were so desperate for answers that they kind of latched onto that. And then you fast forward, the last vampire in the story is Mercy Lena Brown, and that's the one everybody talks about. And this wasn't even that long ago. I think it was more towards, she was the last, she's considered the last vampire. And same kind of story, like she buried her mom and her older sisters, and her entire family was wiped out by this. And her dad was so desperate, her father was so desperate for answers, and his last remaining son had come down with this illness, and she had just died. So he orders that everybody gets dug up, and she was declared a vampire because she had blood in her organs. Well, she had died in January, and it's a cold state. It's, the ground is, she had only been buried 9 weeks before, and it was wintertime. So her organs were still intact. So they they order that they be carved out and ground, and her brother had to drink that mixture that they made out of this.
Oh,
And then he died anyway. So
God.
and so she's said to be the last of the vampires. And I think that not too long after this, they discovered penicillin, and they discovered that this was actually tuberculosis, and there was a way to treat it. And so the disease, yeah, but it was, so in this case, these were true monsters, but they were completely a figment of fear and imagination. So nobody ever actually even saw a vampire. It was just this crazy fear that overtook these communities, trying to find these answers for this terrible disease that was killing everybody.
Absolutely nuts. I mean,
So
what
yeah,
people believed at the time with lack of knowledge, right?
right.
Yeah.
And fear. I mean, and fear and desperation. I mean, when those were hard times. Life was not easy in that, the story of Lena, in the research, she talked about how strong her mother was. I mean, she was either pregnant or with a baby and standing right alongside her father in the field. So when her mother died, the strongest woman she'd ever known, you kind of lose all hope for everything.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank God we current medical knowledge.
Yes.
I stuff like that just perplexes me. But the whole grinding up and then drinking.
Oh, I know.
It's horrifying.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
horrifying.
I think we had to put a disclaimer at the front.
Yeah.
About that for this particular book anyway.
Yeah. And I suppose, yeah, so that people don't start thinking there's modern day vampires and putting that to the test and checking for roots and stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
that's the fascinating thing to me about myths and legends and monsters. Like, there are definitely encounters with things that we cannot explain. And then you've got this that we can explain in retrospect, but at the time
Right.
it was terrifying. And so that's where that myth and that legend of the vampires comes from. Um, there's another story in this book about a community that gets really embroiled in this Winston wild man. It's this naked man that's running around town, they say. It was reported in the paper that one of the most prominent members of the community saw him, but the kicker was it never happened. It was just the journalist writing a good story, trying to get something exciting in the paper. But as soon as it was out, everybody started seeing him, and to the point that 100 men formed a posse, as they like to do in the 1800s,
Oh
and
yeah.
went out with their guns looking for the wild man, and they were ready to kill it. And all they killed was a poor donkey that was, had gotten out of his pasture and was hiding behind a bush, and everyone thought it was a naked, hairy man.
And then the donkey bit it.
We
Yeah.
love when there's posses in our books. Like, we'll actually text each other, "Oh, there's a posse. This is going to be good." It's our favorite. Like,
We
whenever
love a
they
good
form
posse.
A good posse with the line, "I'll make you famous," right? Oh, my goodness, my goodness. Before we leave people today, there's a good story about a famous monster called the New Jersey Devil, and we're not talking about the hockey team in New Jersey either.
So I loved this story because, as we explained earlier, we really try to do the primary source support, and we try to get like newspaper articles or some sort of something to kind of hang our hat on and be able to retell the story from that perspective. But then you get a story that's really old and so layered, and there's so many different versions of it. But that's also when we get to be a little creative. So with that, it's like that story landed across my desk, and I was like, how do you tell this story? How do you do it justice? It's so famous. And also, it's 1753 and Mother Leeds. Like, she's this woman who lives in the woods with her crazy children. And so, how do you really kind of tell all the versions of this in one retelling? So I remember struggling to kind of, where do I start? with something like that. And I had a whole box of Fate magazines, from Phyllis that were like going back years. And I figured I just picked up a handful and I was kind of flipping through, and I came across a story about the Jersey Devil and how there was a forest fire that had happened, and it was a nearby naval base where they had a flare. They were doing a training exercise. A flare went off and started a forest fire. Well, it wasn't the first time that happened, and so they were reporting in Fate about how they were wondering if now that there had been another fire, if there was going to be an increase in sightings, because there was after the first one. So then you get to kind of like create characters to tell this story, and so there, it was kind of perfect to use the fire as that hook and be able to kind of have a fireman reflecting back on childhood stories that he'd heard and be able to tell the story that way and get to create some characters to kind of use as inspiration.
That's crazy. I mean, it's funny how you draw parallels to try to incite stories, right? I mean, fire to bring out the Jersey Devil, right? Or, I mean, it makes sense. I mean, that's a parallel. It makes sense, I guess. But it's just, I mean, it's the funniest thing that fuels lore and legend.
Well, and in this case, like as someone who's also like with us, we both are fiction writers too and creative. So to have a little bit of freedom to be able to write. And in this particular case, I actually have a friend in the paranormal community who's a fireman. And so to be able to kind of like, kind of use that as a springboard and be like, oh, here we go.
And bounce that off, huh?
Yeah.
That's funny. You have quite a few sea monsters in there as well. One of the more famous ones is Champ, I know, in Lake Champlain. I just gotta ask this question. You guys have something against Peppy here in Minnesota, or what's the deal?
We wrote about Peppy.
We did. Peppy's in the other book.
Is Peppy in the Midwest?
Midwest, of course.
You bet.
Course.
You betcha, Tim.
All right. I'm just wondering. I know this is a Northeast book, but I'm just making sure that you're keeping it real when it comes to Peppy.
Of course. I have to say though, with Champ, one of the things I loved about that story was, Champ had been seen for so many years. It was way back to the indigenous people. The tribes were warning the explorers to not bother Champ in the lake, basically like be careful, don't wake him up. There's a giant sea serpent in there. And then he was seen over decades and centuries by people on this lake over and over again. And that one was really well reported in newspapers, even back to the 1800s. It was so fun to actually read some of these accounts in the old papers about sea captains and their sailors seeing this monster just kind of basking out in the water and frolicking, and how big it was. Some people said it was 25 to 35 feet long. And I think that the early 1800s account said it was like 175 feet long or something just like enormous. A big head like a horse. And I think one of them said it had eyes like onion peels and had 3 teeth, which sounds weird.
I always wonder sometimes, like, how were you able to count the teeth?
Yeah.
Like, how are you
Champ
able to
needs
see
a
that?
dentist.
Very quickly, that's how you count it. Especially if it's coming at you.
Yeah. But the cool thing with Champ, Tim, is that like this community loves him. Whether you're a believer or a non-believer, he is an icon of this community, to the point that in the 1980s, they created a law in New York and what's the other state it's in? All of a sudden my brain is drawing a blank.
Champ was New York,
Vermont, New York and Vermont.
Vermont.
Sorry, this is the first time I had to look at my cheat notes. My brain is full of facts I didn't even know were in there. But in New York and Vermont, they actually instilled a law that if you hunt or harm Champ, you're going to go to prison. So, I mean, that's how much he is beloved in his home states.
Well, you got to love it, because if you're hunting Peppy here in Minnesota, we don't do a thing. So there you go. I mean, that's a difference, right? I mean, I don't think we do anything, do we?
I don't think I didn't see any laws about Peppy when we were researching.
No, that's the other thing we mark. We always like when there's laws protecting these creatures.
Protecting creatures that are unknown.
Yeah.
Because
Posses and laws.
it's Alabama that has the Bigfoot hunting law, right?
Yeah.
Yep. And in Vermont and New York, you can't hunt champ.
No, leave him be.
And in Minnesota, we don't even know if we believe in Peppy. So go ahead and take it. Is the way it
Kill him so we can know he's real.
That's right. Yeah.
Hang his head on our wall.
That's right. Bring it. Well, we got deer heads on our wall, so we might as well have a Peppy on our wall. So I don't know. I don't know where that comes from, but lots of good stories in Monsters of the Northeast. You've got things like the Birdman of Bridgewater Triangle. You've got Thunderbirds in there. You've got plenty of sea monsters. There's even when we were talking about we were alluding earlier to Lieutenant Spaulding and his cursed vampire. The fence rail dog is in there. You've got Lon and his Sykesvillemonster. You've got the Montauk monster in there as well, the Demon of Dover, and much, much more. We didn't even really talk about the big red eye, but there's a white Bigfoot. I don't know where the other colors of Bigfoot are in there, but I don't know why it's got to be racial. I don't know why you got to throw white Bigfoot in there, but you did. But I don't know. But that's in there.
I don't know why Big Red Eye only has one eye when he clearly has two. He's just Big Red Eye, not Big Red Eyes.
Well, too much partying. So that's what that is. But yeah, lots of good stuff in Monsters of the Northeast as well. Two great books out there that you've managed to put out there. You probably could have put 3 or 4, but that's for next year, right?
We're overachievers like that.
That's right. That's right. So we have links to both books in the description of this program, and we're encouraging you guys to go out and get both of them, not just one. Don't skimp. Go get both of them because, again, it's going to be a long fall and a long winter. So you're going to need reading material for both. And what's nice about both books is, again, you want to break it up into little bits and pieces. You want to read a couple of stories at a time. You can do so. And then put the book down and then pick it back up again. So that's what's beautiful about both books is you can dive into it. You can read a couple of stories. You can put it back down if you need to, especially if you got a busy life. So that's what's beautiful about both books. And that's why you should get both of them and then pick them up, put them back down, pick them up, put them back down. You can pick up where you left off. So I encourage you to get both books, Monsters of the Northeast and Ghostly Tales of Pennsylvania. So, ladies, I want to thank you both for being on today.
Thank you for having us.
This is so fun.
So fun.
I'm glad you both came on, and I wish you success with both books. And again, when you write all 4 of them next time, it'll be my challenge to read all 4 of them in 1 week and then have you back on, and we'll do this again.
Maybe you can break it into 2 chunks or something.
Well, we'll probably have to do 2 shows. Yeah. I don't think I'll be able to do all 4 in one show.
That one will be fun though, Tim. We're doing Ghost of the Wild West. Like I'm super stoked about that one.
All right. Yeah.
Yeehaw.
That there's not one that just leaves their hat on and just spurs, is there? I mean, because that could be a little racy. We might have to put a parental advisory sticker.
There might be a couple with assless chaps. I don't think you can be a cowboy and not have assless chaps, right?
Yes, all chaps are assless. That's the big secret to chaps. There are none that have the ass in them. Believe me, I've looked. Just saying.
I'm definitely having some sort of a party where you have to dress as a cowboy, Tim, because I want to see you rocking those sometime.
I have a picture.
Do you?
Mm-hmm. Although I've got pants on under the chaps.
Well, I mean, you guys.
Yeah, that's the point.
You got wear.
But I do. I'm wearing a hoodie and I've got chaps on. I actually took the picture inside Fleet Farm because if you can't buy it at the Fleet, you don't need it.
That's true. I couldn't agree more.
You can get chaps at Fleet Farm. So
that is amazing.
It is, isn't it? So I'll send you the picture.
Please do.
It's one more thing on your phone you don't need. Oh yeah, I'll send it. Nobody else can get it, but I'll send you the picture. There you go. And it's the most cocky look you'll ever see me have while I'm wearing these chaps. It makes it extra funny. So I don't know why I'm telling you this while we're on air, but I am. Anywho,
Sorry, I opened a can of worms.
yeah, you did. Yeah. But that'll do it for today's show. You can think of me and assless chaps as we ride off into the sunset and think about a future book with ghosts and chaps. I'm looking forward to it. I am. But in the meantime, Monsters of the Northeast and Ghostly Tales of Pennsylvania, it's out there right now. Get it in the description of the show today. And again, I wish you the best of luck on both these books. And as I've told Natalie, I'll tell you, I've told Jess this already. I expect you both to be New York Times bestsellers by the end of the week. So, best-selling authors. So I'm already manifesting it. It'll happen by the end of the show.
We can do it. Our listeners are the best listeners. So I'm believing in this with you.
And I think you're probably, if you check your phones right now, the Hindustan Times is called. You've already made the Hindustan Times bestseller list. Just check your phone. So there you go.
We're so famous right now.
You're so famous right now. It's ridiculous. All right. We'll see you guys next week right here on the best in paranormal podcasting. You've been listening to Darkness Radio.
For more audio and video archives of the show, please visit darknessradioshow.com. Thank you for watching.
Ooga booga, ooga booga, ooga booga.
Quick head fake with a handshake. Now go out and get that cake. Play